If you're wondering what this is, this was given to me by Emsuda Wijic from Bosnia, one of the founders of Skrim Demira peace organization. And when I finally got out of Sarajevo, she gave it to me. I saw her back in Zagreb. And I also gave her my clatter ring that my mother gave me to thank her and for everything that I learned in Bosnia. And it's taken me 18 years even to speak about it. So tonight you're only going to get a glimpse of this. But I hold this because it represents a lot of the women who are in the camps, along with their husbands and their children. So it's very dear to me. And I wanted to put it up here on the stage and I wanted to give everybody there in Bosnia a place to be able to have the mic in front of them as well. And the reason I need notes is because I could not tell this story for over 18 years. And so tonight you only get the beginning of it because it's so long, so detailed, so complex. So before we go to Bosnia, I want to take you to London, and at the landing with a colon of, what has happened to my Bosnia? Where has she gone? And so I say that because I ask the question, how many ends are there to the human story? I look into the flow of the Thames, and I see a liquid library. I see a liquid library that transgresses time. And I stand there, and perhaps in a way it becomes, for me and for many others, a day of atonement, a river that flows through time and through history. And I'm standing there with my camera in my hand, with a broken glass for the eyepiece. And I haven't used my camera for a very long time because I couldn't walk and I couldn't move properly. And this was after I was in Bosnia. And I needed to learn how to speak about this. And so I was staying in the eastern end of London, which at that time around Brick Lane was the old immigrant neighborhoods of the Jewish and the Irish and the Bangladeshis and other folks from India, Pakistan. And I was staying at a loft off of the Limehouse Cut, and where a small group, as they say over there, a charity, an anti-militarist charity, a War Resisters League kind of charity, had a little office, and I was staying in the loft. And it used to be, the loft was actually a part of this building, which was the largest dog biscuit company in Europe. So imagine, you're living in a dog biscuit company, and I wish, if my dog Bosco was there, he'd be really happy, But staying there and not speaking at all, not being able to speak. And facing all of the streets like Morris Road, and where you would see open fields, and I'd see very many birds, cormorants, you name it, that was wild, but the reason was because the East End was bombed during World War II. And in the middle of a field, which used to be homes off of the Morris Road, there was an old pub from the 1800s with still, in 1995, had a VJ sign in the window. So why was I noticing all this, What was going on? I couldn't say anything about it. I was quiet because this was the return trip. After traveling through Europe, after the siege of Sarajevo and getting out of there by step up Mount Ignum, where each foot could have been a landmine, And I saw connections here in the East End with the city, with its growing towers of fluid capital and creating paper tigers with money. And back, on the journey back to here, it was like going through a Europe that no longer had checkpoints. And except I was in a city that was surrounded by howitzers and other forms of weapons. So I went back that day across Brick Lane to the Limehouse Cut, which was near to the Isle of Dogs. And I looked out the window, and there was this woman there, Beverly, who was behind the Japanese screens, and she was doing the work of the charity. And there was a long table where people would come and sit and talk about a lot of the issues of the world. Mostly English, so I was the Yank. But that day, it was The Guardian. I believe, if I remember right, it was July 23rd, 1995. And the paper was there with coffee cups and whatnot, and I looked at it. And it was the fact that the Serbian Srpska army had invaded a safe zone that the UN had stated would be a safe zone. And that was Srebrenica. So I looked at the papers, and I knew what was happening, because I knew the stories from the people that I had met in Croatia and Sarajevo. And then, it was only then that my memory was juggled so that I could go back to a place that I was speechless about. Back to a place where I was supposed to make a film, and I couldn't. I was a failure, so I worked on someone else's film. So, what happened was that I wound up re-entering a story, and I will only tell you the beginning of it, because the beginning of this story is about approaching Mount Ignem. And if you understand the mountains of Sarajevo area, they're called, to most people there, the Olympic Mountains. Igmen is like 1,500 meters. It's the smallest of the mountains. But during the Olympics in 1984, this was the glory of Yugoslavia. This was the Olympic trials. It was not just trials, it was the Olympics. And the whole southwest part of the city of Bosnia was made into an Olympic village. And it was 1984. It was 1984. It was the 1984 that was past George Orwell. I assumed, even myself, I said, George came and went. Something else is going on now. I don't know if I like it, So I had decided, since I wanted to go and had wanted to go to Sarajevo for a year after being in Poland the year before, that I would hitch myself a ride with Skrimdemira, Msuda's group. And so there was 27, and we're all women, actually. It was a call to women of the world to come. Now, I was, besides a former journalist for the CBS News Network, I was the only other documentarian. And what was this? Who were these people? There's Gertie from 75 years old from Holland. Her name means pearl. And then there was Margie from Lindisfarne, who was a sailor, and she too was old, and in Scotland, and she had double hip replacement. You're going to climb up a mountain, But they wanted to go, and I wanted to go for another purpose, because I've been to several war zones, and I wanted to know why. Why is it that my country is not paying attention to this, and why is this so controversial? So we proceed that night, and with Msuda and Sarifa and all these folks, and including several English people, and climb Mount Igmen in the middle of the night. Now, that's like climbing Pikes Peak in the middle of the night. And shepherd boys took us down on pathways that have lasted for almost 1,000 years, because it's Sarajevo is little Jerusalem of Eastern Europe. And we made it, and as myopic as I am, the sky was absolutely extraordinary. And we got to the bottom, and a red-headed English woman who considered herself one of the leaders said to me, well, why don't you go back up and look, since you've given everybody all your dark T-shirts, and see what's going on, you know. So I did, because, you know, you're a target in the middle of the night for any kind of night vision weapons. So I did, but when I came back, no one was there. So I proceeded to walk, and I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know where this famous tunnel was, and I proceeded to walk right into a trench, 7 feet deep, in the middle of a fire, about 45 meters, 30 meters of a firefight. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. And I had my kind of Dante-esque kind of moment where I looked and said, well, in the middle of my life, I'm looking for a home, but I don't have one. And I'm here in this woods, and I don't know what to do. And instead of a leopard coming towards me, I have a dog howling, and I'm here for hours, and I have a death shake. And so then I'm picked up by 2 men around 5 o'clock in the morning after being there for about 6 hours. And one of them says to me, I said, I don't speak English. And he says, I have a cousin in Cleveland. So, you know, and then took me into this illicit bunker that I wasn't supposed to know about. And in that bunker, there was this beautiful woman down at the end of the hallway. I was a mess. My whole right side was just broken up. But this young man came up to me, and I will end the beginning of a very long story that I hope to turn into a book. He came up to me, and he was beautiful, and he was about 22, and he had a flak jacket on, and he sat down, and he was my inquisitor. And he said to me, well, what are you doing here? And I said, I came to find out what's going on here. And he said, would you please tell me why we are doing this to each other? And I sat there with him, and I don't smoke cigarettes, and I smoked a cigarette. And then 6 men behind him were just staring at the 2 of us talking. And it wasn't an interrogation. It was, why are we doing this to each other? And it wasn't just the Bosnians. He has a history of being in Europe, and I couldn't answer him. And then he said to me, in this place that had been bombed the week before where I could smell dried blood, he said to me, you know what we should be doing? You and I should be in Sarajevo on Vasmiskinska Street, and we should be having a coffee, and we should be talking about poetry. But now you and I are facing each other, and I will let you through. I will let you into Sarajevo, because I trust you. But I want you to do one thing. I do not want you to use your camera. I want you to use your eyes. I want you to see what's happening, and I want you to tell this story. That's right.